In this video, I'm going to talk about some things that I've learned in therapy, some insights that I've gained, some realizations that I've come to. I've been going to therapy for a pretty long time, since my freshman year of college, and I've seen a lot of different therapists and tried a lot of different types of therapy. In that time, I have definitely learned some things about myself and some general things about the world and the way that people think that I would like to pass on to you, the viewer. I think it's also useful because it gives you a vague idea of what people might talk about in therapy and the kind of things that might help you from therapy. But really, it's taking the way that you think about a negative situation and reframing it so that it's a little bit more positive, and also changing some of the more fundamental ways that you think that are detrimental to your mental health. This is part of an ongoing series of videos about therapy that I have. I have a video called What You Should Know About Therapy for first-time therapy goers and people who don't really know what to expect. There's a lot of great tips in that video that I think everyone should be aware of. I also made a video about my experience with art therapy, which was kind of different, but something that I really enjoyed, and if you want to hear more about that, I will link both of those videos in the description. I have some things written down, but I can also think of some things that I've talked about with my therapist in more recent sessions that I can share, but I'm going to speak kind of extemporaneously and off the top of my head, and you know, we'll just see where this conversation goes. And now, things that I've learned in therapy. I think one of my earliest memories in therapy is saying that I was so afraid that I was being dramatic, and that kind of just went back to the fact that I had trouble validating my feelings because growing up I didn't really have anyone to validate my feelings. I guess I've always been one of those people that really felt things deeply and really struggling with feeling like I was feeling more than I should, but my therapist reassured me that my feelings are normal and I shouldn't worry about being too dramatic. I think it's important to realize that your feelings are there to alert you of something, to let you know that something is of concern, and for that reason you probably shouldn't push them away or ignore them. They should be dealt with in a timely manner. This is something along the lines of regretting things in your life. I think everyone has a situation in their life that they wish they would have handled differently, but the truth is, as my therapist said, you always do what you think is best for you at the moment, and for that reason you shouldn't be beating yourself up for a decision you made in the past because you just didn't know, right? We all just do our best. Another thing that I learned early in therapy was that it was a lot easier for me to talk about emotions that were more comfortable for me to have. So for example, I would describe something as frustrating rather than saying I was scared or afraid. Of course, this is very common, especially when you're starting therapy. It's nice to deal with the issues that are a little bit easier to talk about in the beginning and then maybe slowly get into the more hard-hitting stuff, which I think is a totally valid strategy, especially when you're starting out. It's important to remember that it is okay to feel uncomfortable in therapy. It's okay to be scared to talk about a certain thing, because that means that that's probably something that you really want to talk about and figure out and get some help with. Another thing my first therapist noticed was that I often talked about how I thought of something rather than how I felt about something when I was asked how I felt about something. And I think that goes back to the fact that I've always thought of myself as a more rational and logical person as opposed to an emotional one, but the truth is, emotions have more to do with it than we'd like to admit, right? Something that's pretty commonly talked about in therapy is relationships. Relationship with your parents, with your family, with a significant other. A very common theme that you'll probably recognize in therapy is that the way that you're raised as a child and the way that your parents and family treat you has a lot to do with who you are as an adult and the problems that you have as an adult. And as much as we'd like to declare independence from our parents and our family when we reach a certain age, they have a lot more to do with who we are than we'd like to admit. For that reason, it's really good to ask the people who raised you what you were like as a child, and if anything traumatic happened to you. My therapist told me about a traumatic thing that happened in her childhood that she didn't even know about until she explicitly asked about it. And it's important to ask about because there's probably only 2 or maybe 3 people on this planet that actually know what toddler you was like. And they're not going to be around forever. So ask some questions, get down to the bottom of it, and see what connections you can make to your present self. Something that I also wanted to talk to my therapist was about relationships, because as I spoke about in my last video, dating and like finding the one is a very nebulous concept to me. And nowadays your significant other has more roles than we could ever imagine, right? Like they used to just be the person you would marry and have babies with, but now we expect our partners to help us grow into better people and help us self-actualize. The truth is, your partner does not need to fulfill every need that you have in your life from other people. You can get your needs from a variety of people, your friends, your family, your mom, your dad, but if there is a need that you can't get from other people for whatever reason, then that is something that you should consider important to have in a partner. I think some of the overall biggest messages that I've received from therapy is A, that I need to be kinder to myself, and B, happiness is something that is a lot more internal than it is external. I have the definition of self-compassion written down in my notebook because it is something that I do not have nearly enough of. Self-compassion is being open and moved by one's own suffering, experiencing feelings of caring and kindness towards oneself, taking an understanding, non-judgmental attitude toward one's inadequacies and failures, and recognizing that one's experience is part of the common human experience. I interpret that as not being on myself for not being perfect all the time, being kind to myself when I make mistakes, or I don't have the most productive day, or I'm just not feeling the best, and also realizing that it's okay to have flaws, it's okay to not be this super high-achieving, successful goddess beauty of a woman. And as cheesy as it is, it does have a lot to do with the whole like I am enough mentality. Definitely something that I've struggled with, but something that I am slowly trying to get better at. Something that my therapist and I also talked about recently was affirmations and gratitude, which are two things that have not always really worked out for me. I've especially found affirmations to be very kind of cheesy and just not my thing. Gratitude, I've been able to go on board with a little bit more. I do understand that negativity bias is certainly a thing, and especially when day to day we spend a lot of time thinking about our own problems and trying to solve them, it can be very difficult to realize there's a lot of things in your life that you should be grateful for. So I totally resonate with, writing these things down and actively in my mind being like, okay, I am privileged, I am really lucky to have a roof over my head and water and food and all of these things. And I know that sounds cheesy, but you can be grateful for a lot of things. You can be grateful for the people in your life. You can be grateful for the shirt that you're wearing because it's super cute and you found it for a really good price. You can be grateful for the fact that you got a good parking spot in the morning. Like, anything goes, My therapist suggested an app for me to use for affirmations, and there's tons of apps on the App Store for that. But for me, it's a lot easier to go along with an affirmation that's already given to me on my phone than to just kind of come up with one on my own. And so that has kind of worked out for me a little better. But the important thing is to start your day in a way that makes it easier for you to think positively. The way that you do that is kind of guiding your mind towards the more positive things, and that's where affirmations and gratitude come in. So it's a great thing to incorporate into your morning routine or just be mindful of throughout the day. Another thing that I've learned in therapy that I think is super important is that the way that you talk to yourself matters. If you make a mistake and you go like, oh, like I'm stupid, then that's something that you should work on changing, because even though you can just brush it off by saying, oh, like I didn't really mean it, those kind of things make more of a difference than we think they do. And hopefully over time you can start catching yourself before it even happens. And it's something that you can start to be aware of in your own mind too, is just realizing how you talk to yourself. And if it's not something that's particularly nice, you can kind of pause and be like, oh, what's a better way I can say that? I made this mistake and that's okay because I am human and I've had a stressful day and I don't have to be perfect all the time. And that is a much better way of thinking. I've also had therapists recommend a number of self-help books to me, which is a great way to get started in your mental health journey if you're not quite ready to take the plunge into actually going to therapy, even though you should, because everybody needs therapy. But it's also a great supplement to seeing somebody on a regular basis. Ones that I've been suggested that I really enjoy are The Happiness Trap, The Pursuit of Perfect, Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff, and I think there's also a workbook that goes along with that. And if you're in a relationship, there's a 5 love languages quiz that you can take. You can do it with your partner and kind of compare results, and that's kind of a fun way to just kind of be like, oh, like this is what you need, this is what I need, and this is how we differ. I think there's also an apology style quiz on that same website. Tons of resources. You can go out and Google to your heart's content for more. Again, this is just a small sliver of the things that I've talked about in therapy. I did my best to regurgitate them, but maybe not in the most coherent or understandable way, but I did my best. If you're thinking about going to therapy, you totally should, because therapy is great and everybody needs therapy and you deserve therapy. If you have anything that you've learned in therapy that you would like to share with the world, go ahead and leave them down below in the comments. My name is Grace. Thanks for visiting my YouTube channel, and I will see you again very soon. Bye.